Morning, everybody. How we doing? It's a Thursday morning. We had our third open mic last night. I performed, I think, 4 or 5 of my songs. Got a pretty good response. Our turnout wasn't great, but it was a pretty cold night here in early November in Minnesota. We're starting out with a great record by Bill Harris, a very underappreciated guitarist who plays some wonderful acoustic jazz. And this Emerson recording is pretty fantastic. I'll get back to that in a second, but I've had a few people say, you're brave for having shared about your personal stuff. And I've given a fairly, I'd say not watered down, but like succinct version of it. But I think it's only fair to my people who are regulars who watch this channel for a long time to know what I'm going through. Because I want them to understand why my time and ability to produce videos is diminished. And so we're kind of going with what have I listened to in the cafe recently right now. And I think it's actually a fun way to approach it. It keeps the stuff fresh in my head in terms of having heard it. And I'd love to get into deeper matters again and more biographies and stuff like that coming down the road. But right now, with where I'm at, running this business by myself, doing 70 hours with live music and the open mics and the waffle bar, and I mean, my cup's pretty full. My energy levels are pretty low, and I still love this. I love the communication, I love the dialogue, I love the community. I realize that I'm always going to be a bit of an outsider in the VC, the vinyl community. Some of the comments I've made rankle certain people, but I mean, I'm also just sharing honestly from my heart how I feel about things, and that's how it is and what it's going to be. But so it wasn't in any way to diminish my wife or my marriage. I mean, I had 9 great years with her. The last year's been tough. I hope she figures it out. I hope the cosmos somehow can reconnect us. But at this point, it's really hard to imagine being with her again, staying in the same room with her again. It just would be hard to imagine going back to that suspicion all the time and trying to figure out, is she lying? Is she telling the truth? What is she lying about? And her being on drugs right now. And really, I haven't spoken with her for over a month. So she's in isolation with this guy. Just, they get it, nobody else gets it, which is, I mean, I've been in that place, so I understand. I'm doing acid every day because I get it, nobody else gets it. You know what I mean? It's a mindset that you have to justify the positions that you're in and the cravings and the responsibilities that you dropped. And not say LSD never really affected my responsibilities or my ability to get to work and hold a job. You can keep that fairly recreational and a spiritual recreational of that. LSD definitely impacted a lot of my mind, a lot of how I think, a lot of how I see things, a lot of how I perceive the world that I live within. And I don't feel like I'm part of it. I feel like I'm a witness to it. And I think that's somehow the key in a way, is to be above the fray. And the weight keeps coming off, which is a great thing. I'm exhausted. I am spiritually and emotionally really tired. And I catch myself all the time saying, man, I'm tired. But really what I'm saying is I'm kind of stressed. I'm just worn out. But at the same time, things are getting better. You know what I mean? I'm painting. I'm writing songs. I'm being quite busy with the cafe, having live music and stuff. All stuff I was having a hard time doing. Dealing with what I thought was my wife's depression, which turned out to be obviously an affair and other activities. But again, I just thought I owed it to people to let them know what I was going through. Neil Young Tonight's the Night would be kind of a shitty record if he was chilling in Malibu on a beach. I mean, if someone's going to be going through a hard time, their art's going to reflect that, so to understand why my sharing or my art's been where it's been and somewhat darker and less frequent. I just wanted my followers to understand that I've been going through a tough time, and we're just trying to sledge through it, and we're getting there. We're coming out the other side. I'm still a very blessed human being to live in this life, in this day and this age, to have the perspectives of humanity and this consciousness, not to mention the vastness of space and our place within that cosmos it's humbling, and it makes the miracle of this existence that much more miraculous, that much more wonderful. A ghost on a 75-year flesh vacation, and I can't waste too much of it being miserable. So in spite of sorrow, in spite of my heartache, I always got to remember that my village didn't get macheted last night by mercenaries, so they could steal diamonds or gold or whatever from the resources from the ground. I didn't watch my child get lynched or my neighborhood get burnt to the ground by a bunch of terrorists. And let's call those kind of racists who do those type of things. If you burn a cross and kill a human, you're a terrorist. If you burn a cross in your front yard, not even kill nobody, you're a fucking terrorist. Believe that. I mean, you're trying to spread fear. That's the definition of an act of terror. Intimidation. The promise of bodily harm. Threat. That's terrorism. America's a shameful place at times. But again, it's out of great sorrow that breeds great art, which is what this music is. And let's jump back into the music. So Bill Harris, he plays through the 40s and 50s, if my memory serves. And he kind of really has slipped under the radar. You can find his records, especially his Emerson stuff, for $5. And it's fantastic stuff. He's a great player. I mean, it's not the kind of stuff you hear very often from a black guitar player, to be honest. You know, I mean, it's got some wonderful acoustic sounds and light and frivolous, some Spanish inflection at times. It's fun. El Mariachi. But it's he's a great player. He's a great player. His record, I think I played it half of the day in the cafe the other day. I just kept playing both sides over and over. It was light. It was perfect. It was what I needed at the time. I love jazz guitar to begin with. And so Bill Harris, for all you snobby record player collectors who want you to have a $500 record, this is a $5 record that if you put it on, I promise you your wife won't mind it. On Emerson. And he's got several titles over there. Moving along, a record that I've talked about before, but it's been a long time. Les Modes, the Modes, essentially, right? Mood in Scarlet, great semi-cheesecake cover, pretty fantastic. Meow, darling, she's a kitty cat, pussycat meow. What a great band this is. The Modes, Jazz Modes, Les Modes, whatever you want to call it. Have a few records on Atlantic as well. They were a mid to late 50s creation by Julius Watkins, the great French horn player, and Charlie Rouse, the great tenor player, who ends up with Monk and becomes Monk's probably best muse in terms of playing off of Monk as a horn player. Him and Monk really had a connection that he got. And some of the other horn players that played with Monk over the years seem to get lost with Monk going on his little places and then not be sure where they were coming back in and how to respond to what he said. Rouse always got it, and Rouse's records as an individual are outstanding. His Yeah record on Epic is very expensive and hard to find. You can get Japanese copies for $50. But Yeah is a fantastic record. When he plays bossa nova, when he plays postmodern, he's just a real wonderful, lyrical, beautiful player that is able to bring a lot of that into Monk's edges of avant-garde. Monk's not an avant-garde player, but he kind of invents the avant-garde in a way. And of course, Ellington is a precursor to that even, you know, and Mingus was part of that development. But Monk had a lot of edge, a lot of angles, a lot of interesting darting things, and the old cat walking across the keyboard, chung, 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 chung. Monk was a real iconoclast, a really interesting person. And Rouse really dovetailed with that nicely. Julius Watkins has a 10-inch on Blue Note before this. And he makes some other records. And again, French horn and jazz is a rare commodity. And so to hear this, it's a real treat. It's got some edges of avant-garde in it. It's got some almost spacey Star Trek-like sounds at times. The band is rounded up by Gilda Mahoney. He's given it kind of a Latin feel at times. Ron Jefferson and Martin Rivera. they have one or two other records. I think actually a 10, not a 10 inch. A 10 inch I became one side of a 12 inch. I don't think it was ever issued at the 10 inch though. So there's a one side of a 12 inch. There's a second LP with a white cover with a woman's face kind of almost etched on the white. And they have a couple records again on Atlantic. Really worth diving into. You can find their records in a record store in the wild for 30, 20, 25, 30 bucks. If you see a seller asking 7,500, they're probably asking too much for that, unless it's in pristine condition. Again, the Dawn label that several of these records are on is fantastic. It's a great little label on the East Coast, and kind of a sister to Bethlehem to some degree. Similar artists, similar style, similar vein. Great stuff. The Dawn label, only about 25 titles, so it's a pretty collectible label. The distribution was decent, so you can find them. There's a lot of white artists. The Zut Sim stuff is fantastic as well. Some great covers on those Dawn records. But the Mode, worth checking out. Another record I played quite a lot the other day. So another record I play a lot in the cafe for several days actually was on the Moodsville label, the Prestige subsidiary, probably from '59. I'm guessing Moodsville number 20 by the great St. Louis trumpet player Clark Terry. Everything's mellow. And if you don't know the Moodsville series, it's jazz for people who think they love jazz but don't really know where to start. It's almost all fantastic. And the problem is with asking most jazz people, oh, where should I start with jazz? They're going to be like, oh, Charlie Mingus, Uncandid, that's amazing. Ornette Coleman, Free Jazz, that's the best record ever. Oh, you need Coltrane's Ascension. Wrong, wrong, wrong. 3 strikes, you're out, go sit down on the bench. I mean, that's the problem with jazz, is the people who are all trying to pass on the message about this music all want to come across as so sophisticated, and they get it. Oh my God, with my monocle, I could really hear this Charlie Mingus record really specially. Albert Ayler really comes clear to me right now. But what you forget is that you're passing on Tchaikovsky, Dostoevsky, to a person who can barely read the language. Keep it simple. Keep it accessible. Keep it enjoyable. Let the people go to that difficult stuff when they get there, if they want to. If someone says, I need some art for my home, you're like, oh, Sidney Pollack. Is it Sidney Pollack? No, I get him confused with Jackson Pollock. I think it's Jackson Pollock. I think Sidney Pollack's the actor. But if I give someone some abstract splash paint and say, this is what art is, this is the only thing, or some abstract, I mean, art is very subjective, of course. But most people aren't looking for paint splash on the wall. They want a bucolic piece of scenery. A beautiful woman. I mean, this is a beautiful woman. This is a Beautifulscape. And for God's sake, people, when you introduce people to jazz, if someone comes to the group and they're new and they're like, I'm new to jazz, what should I listen to? 90% of the comments are fucking wrong. And it does piss me off sometimes. Like, what the fuck are you people doing? They just said they're new to this. And I get it. We're trying to reveal how intellectual and sophisticated we are and patting ourselves on the back instead of doing them a service by saying, hey, if you like jazz, check out Red Garland. If you love Red Garland, maybe you'll like, and let them progress. It's Clark Terry. Fantastic player, lyrical player. He can blow pretty hard and bright like the Dizzies and the Clifford Browns and the Nat Adderleys, but he's also a very capable lyrical player. He can play with the mutes, play very soft, not with the cloudiness of a Miles or a Chet Baker, but he certainly has soft embouchure touch and tonality at times that really can take you to Storyville. And the art of the balladeer, and the very definition of the word, the ballad, is the narration of a story. And a great balladeer, if he's not telling you a story, he's not a great balladeer. And Terry really gives you some moments to reflect, some moments of inquisition, some moments of comfort, some moments of mystery, but it's all with a hot chocolate, a warm crackling fire. So you come from a safe place when you embrace what he's doing. Terry's work has a pretty wide body and swing to it in terms of what he does. But again, when you're on Moodsville, part of what Bob Weinstock and Prestige is asking you to do, being on that little imprint, was we're going to ask you to do some ballads. Some kind of slow tempo, mid-tempo stuff. Play beautifully. And a lot of the greats from the swing era that weren't under contract to Norman Granz or had their contracts had expired at Verve, Bob Weinstock swept those guys up. Probably paid them half of what they made for Norman, maybe less than that. And I think a lot of Norman's guys got paid contractually, and with Weinstock, he got paid by the recording session. So, I mean, moving on, but great record, fantastic listen. Coffee shop deluxe. If you want people to enjoy being in your presence while you play jazz music, I mean, most of what I'm going to show you today is that. I've probably showed you this record several times as well, but again, I played it last week, and I played it for almost a day. I played both sides over and over and over again, and I rarely do it with vocal records, but her vocals are great, but it's really the fantastic Joe Wilder and Hank Jones as well, but Joe Wilder especially, along with Wendell Marshall and Kenny Clark. And if you're a jazz fan, me reading you off Wendell Marshall and Kenny Clark and Hank Jones should be enough for you to know that that's a Savoy record I'm talking about. And of course, Joe Wilder has a record as a leader, maybe two on Savoy, and he does a lot of side work as well in 57, 56, 58. And Herbie Mann shows up on some records as well, playing flute on some of the tracks. We're talking about the great Marlene Van Plank. And she's a great gal, great singer, beautiful voice. She's got some blues in her for a white gal. She sings, she inflects, she emotes. She's soft. She's darting. She's, again, a great storyteller. But it's really Joe Wilder who, throughout the procession here, echoes and accents and hints and comments on her vocal, and often in a preacher choir call and response kind of way. They bring down some beautiful gospel. They bring down some beautiful, emotional, haunting, and again, Wilder's tone, his touch. He's just in the background, and he's echoing Sweet Edison. You know, and there'll probably be people saying, oh, he's echoing Miles. He's not echoing Miles. Joe Wilder doesn't give no shits about Miles Davis. Joe Wilder's an old man compared to Miles Davis. Joe Wilder doesn't even hardly recognize Miles Davis exists in 1955. I mean, and they could have been friends for all I know, but I'm just saying Wilder isn't being influenced by Miles Davis. And Miles Davis at this point was just kind of developing his tonality and sound. This guy echoes Sweet Edison, but even, I mean, largely he could say he has a lot of his own blues and black gospel and feel. And I love almost everything I have by Joe Wilder, if I'm honest. It's really, he's some records on Columbia that are pretty out there and pretty affordable. When you see them, $10. They're great stuff. The one on the rooftop in Manhattan, I mean, that's a great record. But it's Wilder as a sideman, where I've really come to find myself frequently raising an eyebrow and being like, who was that? Oh, of course, Joe Wilder. He's a bit of the Jimmy Cleveland on the trombone. Joe Wilder's a bit of that on the trumpet for me. Like, where a lot of times I'll be like, oh man, who has played that lick? And you go look, you're like, oh, Joe Wilder. And of course, Hank Jones often does it on the piano. Jones is a wonderful pianist that all of you know, of course, is part of the great Jones family out of Detroit, along with his brother Elvin Jones, the great drummer, and Thad Jones, the great trumpet player. I had a little mind for a second, but not the greatest cover, you know. But Savoy's covers always aren't that great. But the songs, I Think of Every Breath I Take, Accent on Youth, If I Love Again, Deep in a Dream, We could make such beautiful music together. I challenge you to get this record. Play it for your friends who hate jazz the most. Play it for your wife. And watch her stream it in her car soon after. This is beautiful. Beautiful music. I mean, I rate that record a 10. That's just a great session. That's got very little acclaim. She's pretty anonymous outside of real hardcore jazz fans. People don't know Marlene Van Plank. Her husband was actually an arranger, did work at Sad Boy as well. But fantastic stuff. This is Martha Raye on the Discovery label, a little label out of Hollywood. Great cover. I mean, fantastic eyes. Look at those eyes. Beautiful. Bit more of a show tune gal. And this record has a bit of a lighter feel than the Marlene Van Plank. Some of the tracks on here. Miss Otis Regrets. Life's Only Joy. Oh, Dr. Kinsey's kind of interesting. The Boy Next Door. I mean, it's a quick 10-inch. Not going to be cheap. Great cover art. Again, probably 1954. Discovery 3010. Discovery has two series of 10 inches. The 2000 series, which is more imported European recordings by a lot of European artists often that they're reissuing here. Then the 3000 series, which was more their own recordings by their own artists that they'd signed, including some great Art Pepper stuff. But again, the cover alone is fantastic. The pink is wonderful. They must have had a gallon of the pink because they used quite a bit of pink on their covers around that time frame. Jack Sheldon. We talked about Sheldon not that long ago. If you like Chet Baker, if you like Sweet Edison, if you like the West Coast, if you like Blue Mitchell, lyrical Art Farmer, even Miles Davis, Sheldon has a lot of that, but he can also play with a lot of fire and bravado as well. Great player who ends up very much in the entertainment industry side of things. But as a young guy, this is on the Jazz West label, another little West Coast label, with Jane Fielding, is it? She sings on some of these numbers. Fantastic. Again, cool eyes. That's 2 records in a row with cool eyes. But just beautiful player, fast. This record goes by quickly because it was initially a 10-inch, and the Japanese just issued it on the LP. Another really cool record, pretty hard to come by. I mean, it's the kind of thing you can stumble on in a record store for $10, but online you'll probably pay more for it. On the Storyville label, and the Storyville label, George Wein, Boston. Storyville was a club that he owned, and a lot of the artists he records were live from the club. There's some actual studio stuff as well. But this one's called The Women in Jazz. And it's a compilation of some of the singers and some of the piano players as well that he records over the years, including Toshiko Akiyoshi, who has a couple records on Storyville. And this is towards the end of the Storyville run of independence. I mean, there's a second Danish label called that much later, but this is their early original Storyville label. There's a run of probably 25 10-inches, and then probably about 22 LPs, and that's it. And so this comes near the end, 9/16 in the 16th LP. And some of those LPs were couplings of 10 inches too. So, but this is a compilation of stuff from other recordings on the label. Lee Wiley, fantastic singer. The great Mary Lou Williams, the pianist. Millie Vernon, whose record's really hard to find. Jackie Kane, who with White Carl does quite a few things through the years. The great Teddy King shows up on this record. So you have Lee Wiley and Teddy King, 2 gals I'm big fans of. Like I said, Toshiko Akiyoshi. And so it's mostly vocal stuff with some Toshiko stuff mixed in, some Mary Lou Williams mixed in. Cool cover art. And it's something that, I mean, the right record store is not going to know what that is if they're not jazz people. George Wein presents The Women in Jazz. They're going to throw that out in the bargain bin for $5. You can find that. And the cover is cool. It's a great jazz label. Great artists. Certainly a record. If you see, grab it. Wonderful listen. I probably played that 3 times. And last but not least, today we're going to talk about Patti Page. And Patti Page is one of those singers who shows up in the pop idiom and the kind of country style in some jazz and blues settings. You can really play a lot of different characters with different hats. And like a lot of singers, they're kind of at the mercy of the producers of the session and what the record label's trying to do. And it often leads them to being in settings that are saccharine and less jazz influenced. Some of her stuff is quite, like I said, pop country. Patti Page, you're by no means you need to go and get every Patti Page record. But she does some recordings here on Mercury at Mercy. There's a east side, there's also a west side where the cover's kind of reversed. And Pete Rugolo, the great arranger, is running the charts here. And Rugolo, of course, worked with Stan Kenton for quite a while. He's a very innovative, interesting composer and arranger, a lot of influence from Ellington. Some hints of edge at times, but just a real interesting guy with his angles and his how he uses tones and color. But he kind of lays back a little bit and really gives her room to do her thing. And like Down the Depths of the 90th Floor is just fantastic. Wait Till You See Him's fantastic. The Wrong Kind of Guy is fantastic. I Fall in Love Too Easily. I Stayed Too Long. I mean, just great songs. So they do great material, great arranging, great singing, and she's a beautiful gal as well. Park Avenue, baby. A later stereo copy. Again, a record you can find a bargain bin for $2, $3, $4, $5. That's a great, awesome, fun listen. And that's kind of what we want to reiterate again. There's so much jazz out there that's so fun, that's not expensive. And just because you can't brag to your friends that you paid $200 for something doesn't mean that you actually will look wiser for getting that you can get great jazz for $5 and not have to put your monocle in to enjoy it. And you won't drive your friends away. So that wraps up today's episode. I do have to pay some bills. If anyone wants to donate to the channel, PayPal, Patreon, there's lots of different ways you can pledge money to the channel. It's going through YouTube itself. It's all appreciated. I need the help right now. My wife, having split, is costing me dearly financially. And I'm doing what I can to being up as long as I can, do as many things as I can, but I still need some help. If anybody wants to pledge some money, it's greatly appreciated. I could probably set something up with some people getting some t-shirts out to some people for certain pledges. So appreciate you all. I mean, you guys are my community. Much love. Y'all be safe. Hope y'all had a good Halloween. November's here. Turkey's coming. Christmas is around the corner. You're going to be hearing that stuff everywhere you go pretty quickly. So anyway, y'all be safe out there. Have a great day. Those of you who are driving, drive carefully. Much love. Peace.